having recently celebrated my 10-year marriage anniversary, I can now say that 10 years in prison is the best preparation for marriage. Now, people laugh and think that's funny, but it's true, because in prison, you are stuck inside a really small cell, and you have to live with people who you don't know and who you don't like, and who oftentimes may not like you. People in prison often have bad attitudes, very poor education, low IQ, poor social skills, but guess what? When you have problems with people in prison, you can't get a divorce. No, you can't run home to your parents. No, you can't run away. There is no option for separation, and if you try to run away, there are armed guards who will shoot you. You have no choice but to deal with your problems and work hard to find a solution. There is an interesting phenomenon that many people who are abusive or violent out in society, many of these people, definitely not all of them, but many, when they go to prison, suddenly they are very often no longer so abusive and violent. And one major reason is because they know that they can't get away with it. They are now surrounded with other people who are very violent and abusive, and so they tend to be much more careful with their behavior. When people really want to, they will find self-control. Now, I myself spent 10 years in prison, and it was great preparation for marriage. In most prisons, especially in the USA, you often don't get to choose who will be your cellmates. The prison guards just put anyone they want to in your cell, and you have to learn to get along with them. One day, another prisoner named Ricky was telling me a story about his former wife, and he was complaining about her. Well, I had been in prison. I went to prison when I was only 16 years old for multiple armed robberies, and because I was arrested when I was so young and having spent so many years locked up, I did not have any social experience with relationships or marriage. So I said to him, "Hey, Ricky, that must mean that a good marriage is basically having a good cellmate." He thought that was funny and said yes. Very often, prisoners will whine and complain because they made dumb decisions and now they are stuck with a 5 or 10 or 20 years in prison. But guess what? Those are called consequences. Many times, crimes are committed under the influence of drugs or alcohol or in the heat of passion, but guess what? That's tough. You made the decision and you must live with the consequences. Now, when people hear this, they will nod their head and agree and say, yes, that's right. But guess what? That's also true for marriage. When you got married, you made a vow to stay with that man or woman for the rest of your life. And very often, people find out after marriage that sometimes it's not as easy and as fun as they thought it would be. There are all sorts of challenges and trials and unforeseen difficulties that happen in life. Of course, there are also wonderful joys and benefits of marriage, but people do change. People get old. The human body at 55, 65 is not the same as it was at 25. These are the inescapable realities of life, and when you choose to get married, you choose to endure these realities all the way till the end. After my release from prison, I got involved in volunteer work and spent many years overseas, volunteering in a leper colony, in a refugee camp, in orphanages, and while living in different cultures, I remember the first time I heard about arranged marriages. There was a young man who was getting married. This was in a country in Southeast Asia. He was getting married to a woman who he had only known for just 3 weeks because it was an arranged marriage. And to be clear, there is a world of difference between arranged marriages and forced marriages. Please do not confuse those two because they are very different. They are not the same. What I am referring to are arranged marriages. Now, being a Westerner and American with a Western background, the idea of getting married to someone he had just met and had only known for a few weeks and who was chosen by his tribe and parents was for me a great surprise. And I became curious and started to read about this and was shocked to learn that not only is this still a common practice in many areas of the world today, but that arranged marriages have a very low divorce rate. For example, one study showed the divorce rate of arranged marriages being less than 4% as opposed to around 40% of marriages in the US. Or here, it's estimated over half of marriages worldwide are arranged, In the United States, while the divorce rate hovers around 40 or 50%, the divorce rate for arranged marriages is 4%. In India, where some estimate that 90% of marriages are arranged, the divorce rate is only 1%. Now, having lived in so many different countries and cultures, I am fully aware that there are many different factors that influence this, but there are two primary factors why arranged marriages are far more successful. Number one is obvious. Instead of relying on your own fickle, vacillating feelings and heart, the choosing of a good spouse is instead made by those who are older and have wisdom and experience to help you make a good decision. The Bible says that in the multitude of counselors, there is safety. That's true. Getting married is one of the single greatest, most consequential decisions that you will make in your life, and you don't want to make such a big decision with your own limited experience, and especially under the influence of romantic feelings. Feelings change, people change, but the timeless principles of successful families and marriages do not. If you take a moment to stop and think about it, it's really odd that we ask for advice from people before buying a car or buying a home or choosing a college or career, but when it comes to making a choice of a lifelong contract in marriage, we tend to want to make that decision all by ourselves, which is strange since the person we will marry will influence us far, far more than any house or car or career. I am now a father, and when we had our first child, I of course would spend time teaching my son how to do things. But when he was about 3 years old, he didn't want help anymore and started to say, "No, I can do this by myself." Well, it turned out that he couldn't do it by himself. Unfortunately, I have had the opportunity now of seeing people get married who didn't want to listen to advice, didn't want to recognize signs and red flags that there might be trouble ahead, and now they are divorced. And why? Because they said, "I don't need counsel, I can do it by myself." And then, of course, the separation and divorce brings all the ensuing stress, misery, and pain. The husband and wife have permanent scars. And it's not just them. The children suffer much worse. The children, these boys and girls made no choice whatsoever. They're completely vulnerable. The children didn't do anything wrong, but they are forced to suffer. For me personally, it's just terrible to see this. And to think that all of this can be largely avoided by getting counsel and advice and being willing to listen from the experience of others. Choosing a spouse for marriage can be a lot of work, so it's best and very helpful to outsource this work and involve others in helping us. And reason number two why arranged marriages are so successful is the same reason I learned in prison. In regions and cultures where arranged marriage is common, there is usually a negative stigma attached to the idea of divorce. So when people enter the marriage, they know that this is a lifelong commitment and divorce is simply not an option. Just like when I went to prison, you can't run away. You have to stay and learn how to deal with the challenges and find solutions. The same basic rules that I learned in prison are the same rules that have helped in my own marriage. Don't be dumb and selfish. Think about how your decisions impact others. Don't be a jerk. Rather than always thinking about yourself, think about people around you and find ways to make a positive contribution, or at the very least, don't do things that upset and bother other people. I am a really big believer that the success of marriage has more to do with who you are and very little to do with the other person. Also, the saying that a happy wife is a happy life is true. When I spend time and make efforts to make my wife happy, she makes me happy. This is not some sort of Western concept of quid pro quo. If I do this for you, then you do this for me. No, we are a marriage, a team. We are not two, we are one. We are here for each other, and so when we bless each other, we are blessing ourselves. I personally love being married. I enjoy being married. I got married at the age of 33, but I wish that I had been able to marry much earlier at 23 or even earlier. Unfortunately, I grew up without any objective purpose in my life, without any objective morality or hope or values, and I made terrible decisions that cost me 10 years of my life in prison. The paradox is that getting arrested was the best thing that happened to me because it was while I was in prison that I found hope, the morality, the objective values, and objective purpose that I so desperately needed. This video is about why prison was great preparation for marriage. In future videos, I will explain why I made a promise not to kiss my wife until we got married and whether or not I kept that promise, the 4 qualities that I wanted in a spouse. I made a long list of qualities I wanted, but there were 4 non-negotiable qualities, so I will tell you what those were. Also, I will explain why interracial marriages are not a good idea. Yes, you heard that correctly. I am married to a woman of a different race and nationality. We have an interracial marriage, but I will be making a video explaining why interracial marriages are not wise. So stay tuned for that. Thank you for watching.